This is the Vic Feazell Show podcast, sponsored by Moroso Wood-Fired Pizzeria, Pinewood Coffee Roasters, and the law offices of Vic Feazell. We had lunch earlier, and you corrected me on some other disinformation that I believed, and that was that the Texas Ranger had killed Bonnie and Clyde.
Well, it was Frank Hamer. He was helped set up the ambush that killed Bonnie and Clyde. He was there, but he was not a Ranger at the time. He had left the Rangers at that point. Now, the Rangers often skip over that in some of the histories, but he was working for the Texas prison system at that time. Hamer has a distinguished career as a Ranger. He also was an open racist in many ways. If he saw a reporter who had written a bad story about him, he would pistol whip the reporter. He was a union buster. In fact, that's how he made his money in his later years. He busted unions down in Houston, the longshoremen's unions and others. And one little tidbit I always like to mention is that when Hamer became engaged to his wife, she was at that time under indictment for murdering her first husband. She later got off, though. So
Yeah,
she
probably
didn't have to
with
serve
his
any
help.
prison time.
Yeah, for murdering her husband and then getting engaged to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
He was a tough guy,
Sounds like it. Yeah.
but a little more gray area to Frank Hamer than a lot of people like to talk about sometimes.
So it wasn't really a Texas Ranger; it was a former Texas Ranger.
To get Bonnie and Clyde, that's correct.
He made enough money busting unions that he was able to build him a fancy house in Austin and retire in Austin, didn't he?
Yeah, he did okay. He
did okay.
He had a company. I mean, that was his company in the later years. That was their job. The shipping companies would hire them to go down to the port and slap some strikers around.
I've always been amazed at how some of these Texas Rangers and some other law enforcement people can retire on a law enforcement salary, which everybody knows isn't that great, and suddenly they're living on a 360-acre ranch in $1 million house with all this cool stuff all around them. How'd that happen? But you see it all the time.
Well, a lot of Rangers tried to make money off Hollywood after they left the agency. Some of them did, some didn't. There was one in Dallas named Clint Peoples, who was a senior captain with the Rangers.
I remember him. He was around when I was around.
Now, he got thrown out of the Rangers because they caught him trying to work his own secret deal with Hollywood. And at the time, the Rangers, as an institution, were working their own deals. They insisted on script approval for any official program, any program that used official information from the Rangers. And Peoples was trying to work his own deal, and the Rangers found out about it and got rid of him.
They were very protective about that, the same way J. Edgar Hoover was about the FBI.
Absolutely.
He required script approval on anything that even mentioned the FBI. Yeah.
So that's why you see these sanitized shows, because that's the only way they could get made. Now, Peoples went on to become affiliated in a way with Billy Saul Estes, who was one of the great con artists of all times. And Peoples, for years, was trying to get Hollywood interested in a TV show or a movie about him. And in fact, you can go back into his files at the Dallas Public Library and read all sorts of treatments and letters back and forth where Peoples cracks a murder case involving Lyndon Johnson, and Peoples alone is the only one who can crack this. And it goes on and on. Those movies were never made, however.
Yeah, and they tried to tie Lyndon Johnson to Billy Saul Estes, didn't they?
They tried to tie Lyndon Johnson to the murder of a federal agricultural official in East Texas, because Billy Saul Estes was involved in some cotton pricing scams, and this official was looking into it, and Billy Saul was claiming that LBJ had this official murdered because Billy Saul had been giving LBJ money. None of this was ever proven. Billy Saul also claimed he could prove that LBJ had John Kennedy killed.
Yeah.
Billy Saul had all sorts of theories going, but
Now, is this the one he was claiming that the guy was killed with a shotgun, and they said it was suicide?
yeah, and it was very questionable.
And
The
the
guy
shotgun was like found 20 feet over the fence. Or
oh
something.
no, but the shotgun was found next to him, but he was shot 5 times with a shotgun.
Oh yeah, and it was ruled suicide.
Real suicide.
Yeah.
Yes. It was a weird case.
Now Boutwell wasn't involved in that. Sounds like a Boutwell thing. Boutwell used to be a Texas Ranger.
Yeah, that's true. In the 50s, yeah.
He was actually in the helicopter circling the University Tower
Right,
during
I
the
read
Whitman
that.
shooting.
I read that.
So he, in one respect, he was a hero. And like I've said on a previous podcast, we'll give the devil his due. He was up there risking his life doing that.
Well, look, that's the way in a lot of these cases with the Rangers. A lot of them did some really brave things, and then I don't know, something happened. It's strange in a lot of ways. I mean, for example, looking back at Frank Hamer, he was courageous and he chased down a lot of bad guys. At the same time, if he saw you on the street and he didn't like what you'd said about him, he'd come over and pistol whip you till you were unconscious.
Wow. And there wasn't much law to do anything about that either.
Oh, he got fined $25 once for pistol whipping a reporter in Houston. That didn't slow him down much.
Tell me a little about your history in Dallas.
I was at the Dallas Morning News for 34 years as a national reporter, and then as an investigative reporter, and then as an investigative editor. Spent a lot of time looking at state government, state medical board, that sort of thing.
And was this always with the morning news?
Mostly I worked for the Dallas Times-Herald for a while and the Miami Herald for a while. When I first got out of school, I was at the Corpus Christi Caller.
Okay, so you were with the Times-Herald.
I was.
That's where Hugh was.
Hugh was not there when I was there. Jim Henderson, Hugh's co-writer, was there when I was there.
I remember Henderson. Yeah, Henderson wrote with Hugh on that big 4-page article about Lucas. Yeah,
right.
Henderson did a lot of the writing on Lucas.
Yeah,
where
Jim
did the research and Hugh and Jim was doing the writing.
Yeah, I think Jim did some reporting too, but Jim was a great writer.
Yeah, Jim came down and covered along with Hugh some of our grand jury stuff. And one of the most embarrassing episodes of my life, he came down with Hugh and helped us cover when we thought we had found Frida Becky Powell.
Oh, right.
And she turned out to be an imposter.
Right.
She actually passed a polygraph. And this is one of the reasons I have problems with polygraphs. They're a good tool, but you can't take them to the bank.
Right.
We hired the guy who had been a former polygraph operator for DPS, Wayne Baker. He had actually taught a lot of the DPS polygraph operators working then how to do it. And I hired him to come down. I flew this woman to my house in Austin. Her name was Phyllis Wilcox. We're going to do a bunch of episodes on Phyllis Wilcox. I have plenty of audio and video with her. I hired a private investigator, and we located her in Missouri. She had been writing letters to Henry claiming to be Becky. And, man, she made a good argument. I mean, she knew all the facts, but we found out later Henry had been feeding her that information. Her husband, Kirk, was there. And Kirk sat in on the interview claiming, yeah, this is Becky. Yeah, I was a Red Ball truck driver back during 1982, 83, whenever it was. And I was at this truck stop, and I saw this little 15-year-old girl, and she wanted to ride, and I gave her a ride, and we've been together ever since. I'm like, wow. So I get Hugh down. I get Jim down. Wayne Baker does a polygraph. He comes out grinning. He says, you guys have found Becky Powell. And then a couple days later, it just crumbled. It crumbled. I remember me and Phil Ryan talking on the phone. Phil wanted her to sign a affidavit under oath that she was Becky Powell. And when Phil wanted that set off the red flags in my gut. I was like, oh, God, something's wrong here. He's wanting to get her under oath. So I took her out in my backyard. I said, come on, Becky, let's go out in the backyard, sit by the pool and talk. And asked my ex-wife, I said, go search her stuff. She's in our house. Search her stuff. And my ex-wife found the letters in her suitcase from Henry, describing the house in Jacksonville, describing everything about Otis, telling about some of their prior stuff together so that she could get all this story straight. But somehow she still passed the polygraph, Doug.
Did they ever find the remains of Becky Powell, or was that Kate Rich that I'm thinking of?
You know what? What do you think, John?
Well, that can go anyway. Kate Rich is Ash, if she even exists in that form. And we don't know if she really, if the Ash was even truly her. And then with Becky Powell, they found a number of bones, which they took to the crime lab up in Dallas, and they tested them. They said that was human bone.
Mm-hmm.
They found like some shoulder blades, and they tested it and said it could have been someone who was, in fact, chopped to pieces like Henry said he did with Becky, and it did match the age of what Becky would have been.
Yeah, it matched the age. But the thing is, see, Henry never gave any facts that the police didn't already know. That's what bothers me about Kate Rich. Everything he confessed to about Kate Rich, they already knew.
Yeah.
And there's so much to indicate he didn't do Kate Rich. Now, that's the only place where Hugh and I disagree. Hugh thinks he killed Kate Rich and Becky Powell. Jim Maddox believed he killed Kate Rich and Becky Powell. For me, the jury's still out. I've got a lot of questions. I would like to talk to Phil Ryan. He might could convince me.
Here's one question that's sort of related to that, I think. The time that the Henry Lee Lucas mania started to take hold was also a time of intense interest in the United States in serial killers.
Yes.
Was that because of Henry Lee Lucas, or did Henry Lee Lucas take off because there was already this intense interest in serial killers?
I think he took off because there was already this interest in serial killers, and because there was all this interest in ritualistic, satanic murders and sacrifice. And, there were a lot of crazy convictions back then that have been reversed since. Like this couple in Austin that ran a daycare center.
Oh, right.
They went to prison for years.
There was another case up in Washington State, I think, like that.
Yeah, and the prosecution was claiming that they were flying these children to Mexico, having sacrifices, rubbing them down with blood, having sex with them, and then cleaning them up, flying them back, and putting them in mommy's car at 3:30 like nothing ever happened. And they were convicted beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, that is runaway hysteria. That's not beyond a reasonable doubt. That's not weighing the facts. That's guilty by hysteria.
Right.
And we were in sort of a serial killer, satanic worship kind of hysteria nationally.
Seemed like every other novel that came out was about a serial killer back then.
Yeah.
Often a Vietnam vet who's turned into a serial killer.
Yeah. And it was just so much easier to believe that there was one Hannibal Lecter out there who killed 400 people than to believe there were 400 murderers walking around that nobody was looking for.
I think the guy who created the character of Hannibal Lecter is from Waco, isn't he?
I don't know.
I think so.
I really don't know.
I'll have to check that when we get
Check
off
that
the air
out.
here.
I'd love to find out. If so, if he's alive, let's get him on. Yeah. Now, I knew Gunnar Hansen. Gunnar Hansen was the original Leatherface in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which, was set, the original one was set right down here in Hewitt.
Sure.
Hewitt, that's where they found Rita Salazar's body, the one that Henry confessed to. Well, Henry and Otis both confessed to it, but then they decided they liked Henry's confession better. Otis, I shot her. No, Henry, no, I shot her. I shot her. Okay, we'll take yours, Henry. But, I think I mentioned at lunch, they had a good suspect on Orange Socks. A good suspect on Orange Socks, a truck driver. At the time of the Orange Socks murder, there was not gravel next to that culvert. It was grass. And when they found the body, there were 18-wheeler tracks in the grass. They had a suspect because there was a truck driver who had kidnapped a woman and was keeping her in his sleeper cab. He pulls into a truck stop to get gas, and some people hear her kicking the truck, and they call the cops, and he gets arrested. Well, they wanted his driver logs, and he wouldn't give them. So they had to subpoena the driver logs, grand jury subpoena, from the trucking company. And his trucking logs place him right there in Georgetown at the time of the Orange Sox murders. But when Henry came along, they totally abandoned him. We've got a report from an investigator in Houston that was hired by Williamson County to help them on Orange Sox. And man, he badmouths Boutwell like hell.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I think I know. We think we know who committed this murder. But when Henry Lucas came along, that's all Boutwell wanted to focus on, and he wouldn't even let us look at this other guy. So I'm hoping that one will be clear, will be solved, because the new sheriff down there, he's had that Orange Sox body exhumed, had DNA taken, because this lady out in West Texas said, that looks like my sister who I haven't seen in 40 years. And sure enough, there was a match. And we now know her name was Deborah Jackson.
Is the truck driver still alive?
Don't know.
Actually,
Don't know.
Yes, he is. Yep, we'd actually pulled him up one day when we were doing that episode, which I won't disclose his name, but yes, he is still alive and lives in Houston.
Yeah, we're not going to say his name because we hope the Georgetown sheriff is all over him. But by what the Georgetown sheriff was saying to the newspaper, he still thinks Henry might have done it. We found a newspaper article from just a couple weeks ago about some young lady named Cheryl Shearer in Missouri who was kidnapped and never seen again while she was working at a convenience store. Lucas confessed to that one while in Montague when the sheriff came and talked to him, but he didn't know enough about it. And that sheriff was a little more honest than Conway or Boutwell, because he could have fed him the information and Henry would have taken it. So they never closed the case. Well, just 2 weeks ago, the sheriff, the new sheriff, and the FBI were out there digging up a farm in Missouri looking for Cheryl Shearer's body based on where Henry said he thought he had buried it. Why is the FBI involved? I don't understand that. I can understand the locals wanting to go dig it up, but why the FBI?
Is there any DNA of Lucas preserved anywhere?
There is. There is. And I'm the guy who submitted Henry for his first DNA. After I left the DA's office, I started representing Henry. I went all over the United States representing Henry on these bogus murder charges.
Did he pay you?
Hanging. No, I didn't get paid. I did.
Only an artwork and matchsticks.
Yeah, I got some matchsticks clocks that Henry made for me. I have about 10 Henry paintings that someday I'm just going to sell because I don't need them. But no, I didn't get anything.
Well, before I interrupted you, wasn't the woman who was Orange Sox, she was sexually assaulted, right? Or was she raped? And was there DNA preserved on that?
They don't know.
Okay.
They don't know. They've got Henry's DNA. If there is anything, they've got the socks, so we'll see. They also had this homemade sanitary napkin.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming, though, that they've tried to match Lucas's DNA to anything they've found.
I would hope so, because it's not going to match. Yeah. And I've got a letter out to the sheriff in Missouri, and we'll read that in an episode coming up, telling him, hey, we've got this DNA, because he says the store was robbed of the money out of the bank bag, but they left the bank bag, and they've been able to recover DNA from the bank bag that was not Cheryl's, and they don't know whose it is. He said, but we don't have anything to compare it to. But I still think it was Henry Lucas. Well, I'm asking him, put it into CODIS. Henry's in there. It's not going to be Henry. Yeah, I gave Henry to the DA in Tyler back in the early 90s or mid-90s. He was accused of murdering a lady up there. And DNA comparison analysis had just come out. They were just starting to use it. So I said, let's do it. And we've got pictures of them drawing the blood out of Henry. Cause I took photos because I figured it'd be historical. And there's all kinds of crime scene DNA, and it didn't match Henry. So they didn't put me to trial. I was going to go to trial on it. 5 years later, they find the real killer. And in the meantime, he'd killed another woman and raped another one in front of her children.
Well, that raises a good point that we talked about at lunch. Not to overstate the obvious, but, and you can elaborate on this, I'm sure, but when a case was cleared and attributed to Lucas, that meant no one was looking for the real killer.
That's true.
Who would, in some cases, I would assume, have gone out and killed again.
That's true. And that's a point I kept trying to make during our grand jury investigation to the press. And that's one way I would answer Jim Adams when he would come attacking me and Jim Maddox. Was it, we're not just talking about Henry Lucas. We're talking about maybe hundreds of murderers walking around free. And Adams would come out and say, that's just not true. These are old cases. These are cold cases. Chances of us ever finding anybody. And I'm going, so what? Why pin it on somebody you know didn't do it? And he just wasn't even willing to look at it, Doug. And not only were we being badmouthed by Adams, but oh my God, Ed Walsh, the former DA from Georgetown who prosecuted the Orange Sox, and his assistant, Ken Anderson. That name will ring a bell. Ken Anderson was the DA when Michael Morton was prosecuted. He's the one who withheld the Brady information, the exculpatory information from the trial. And this man got convicted of a crime he didn't commit and got out 20-something years later.
Right.
And proven innocent. Ken Anderson was a district judge at the time. He was kicked off the bench and later disbarred for what he did. And I've got video of Ken Anderson standing up bad-mouthing the hell out of me and Jim Maddox, telling us to mind our own business and to stay out of their backyard. Because they didn't want to be found out, because this was standard operating procedure down in Williamson County back then.
Well, to me, it goes back to the original question that we've talked a little bit about, and I guess is the basic question. Why did so many people go along for this ride? That's what I've never been able to figure out.
Have you got an idea?
Yeah. I'm going to start practicing psychiatry without a license here.
Well, so does Dr. Phil. Well, no, he may have a license. He doesn't sound like it, but he does.
I have to preface it by saying I've met many law enforcement officers, many Texas Rangers who are dedicated, courageous people who do the best job possible. I mean, I went down in East Texas and spent a day with a guy named Brandon Bess, who's a Ranger. Great guy, works hard. If I ever had a criminal problem, I'd want Brandon on the case. So that said, Rangers, law enforcement officers, district attorneys, they're all human. We all like attention. We all like to feel that we're one of the best in our field. And in this case, I'm thinking everyone wanted to think, going back to what you said earlier, they want to believe that we've got the worst killer on the planet right here. We've got him. We have him. Not you. We do. And you want to have that sense of aggrandizement. That's all I can figure.
That's what Hughes says.
Because now, we all know, all you have to do is glance at the evidence, or the lack of evidence, and see it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. We can see that now because enough time has gone past. We're after that kind of that afterglow of the event, But back then, keep in mind, that was before video. They didn't have the body video. Not everybody had video on their phone. We didn't even have cell phones.
Yeah, but wait a minute. That's all immaterial, I think. You could look at the log and see, well, he clearly was working at the mushroom farm in Pennsylvania that day. He could not have killed someone in Uvalde, Texas.
You're absolutely correct.
Why?
He was
Why
sitting
didn't they
in jail
do that?
in Montague. He couldn't have killed somebody in South Louisiana.
Yeah. So why didn't they do that?
Why didn't they?
Well, I'm going back to my original answer.
They enjoyed those plaques and those chrome-plated pistols and all the awards and the dinners and the applause. Yeah, I get it.
And
I've been there.
And the sense that, hey, the baddest dude in the world is right here, and I got him.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I can figure.
Yeah.
But again, I don't have the professional training to really make that judgment, but that's how it appears to me.
That's what Hugh thinks. That's what Attorney General Maddox thought. And after my conversations with Boutwell and Prince, and after talking with the people who are doing the documentary that's coming out shortly, who interviewed Prince, that's what they think as well. And they're just still sticking to it, still sticking to their guns.
Well, I think we've probably all made mistakes. I know I have, where I thought I was the star of my own movie, and I was feeling really full of myself. And the old saying, "Pride goeth before fall," is certainly still holding true here. So maybe that's what happened.
I did that with Phyllis Wilcox. We call her Phyllis, Becky Phyllis, because she was Phyllis, then she became Becky, and then she became Phyllis again. But when I figured it out, I came clean. I came clean with it. But I knew what had happened to the Rangers, too. You know, I know what happens if you don't come clean. You're going to get painted in a corner and look like hell. The best thing you can do when you get caught in a mistake is immediately go puppy belly up.
Well, that's the thing with the Rangers and Lucas, as you know, they never have come clean.
They never have.
Never.
And after Becky, Phyllis, Becky, I mean, that day, the day my wife found those letters in the suitcase, I called a press conference. I went puppy belly up. I wagged my tail and just peed all over myself and said, "Aren't I cute? I'm so sorry. I screwed up," you know, because I had. I wanted to believe her so bad. And I wish I'd have held back a little longer, you know, but I didn't. Now, you're right. There's some really good policemen out there, people that will risk their lives for us. There's some good Texas Rangers out there. I've known some. But, man, there's some dummies, too. One of my favorite stories happened right here in Waco. There was a murder here in Waco. A lady gets killed in her own home. My friend Truman Simons was a homicide investigator then. He's out there. He's standing outside the house on the sidewalk waiting for some of the other forensic people to get there. Texas Ranger shows up. I'm not going to say his name, but he's not anybody we've talked about today. He's smoking a cigarette. He stalks with Truman a while. He throws a cigarette on the sidewalk and stomps it out with his boot. They walk into the house, white carpet. This guy walks in a little ways. That cigarette is stuck to the bottom of his boot, and it comes off on the carpet. Truman sees it happen, and the ranger turns around and sees the cigarette, and he goes, "Evidence! Bag that!"
Stunning.
Well, and to back that up, I feel I have to issue a disclaimer every time I say things like this. And you're right. There are some great Rangers. There are some smart Rangers. There are some Rangers who have cracked some cases that others couldn't crack. But one of the criticisms of the Rangers is that and to become a Ranger, you have to be a highway patrolman. And in many cases, highway patrolmen do not do a lot of deep investigations of crimes.
No.
And you become some Rangers have become Rangers without broad and deep experience in criminal investigation.
Exactly.
And they learn on the job in many cases. Once again, I have to say there are some Rangers who have gone out there and done sophisticated work and cracked very difficult cases. But I think there's a sense, there's a feeling in the public that these guys have been out to working as detectives for a long time before they're allowed to become Rangers. Well, no, that's not often true.
Yeah, or that they're criminologists or really educated in their field. No.
No, they're often highway patrolmen.
Right. Yeah, they're people.
No rap on highway patrolmen.
Yeah, no rap on highway patrolmen. No, they have a hard job, a scary job. I wouldn't want it.
Right.
I respect the hell out of them. I do. But they're not criminal investigators. They haven't been trained in forensics. Yeah. I just love that story. Bag it. Evidence. But there have been some good ones, and I do not want the Rangers or other policemen to think I don't respect them, because I do. I just think we should do everything right.
Yeah, well, same with me. And I don't want people to think my book is just a hammer job on the Rangers. I mean, there have been some great ones. The problem that or not the problem, but the issue that I wanted to bring to light is there's been a lot of other stuff, too, that's been buried whitewashed, and completely turned around and taken from fact to grand fiction.
Yeah, grand fiction. Now, I got to tell you, I've been sitting here and I've been just sort of skimming the chapter of your book that is about Henry Lucas and that I mentioned in, and I haven't seen anywhere in here where you talk about how handsome I am. I may have to do some interlineating for you. Jonathan's shaking his head. Oh, no. He's always trying to get me. He's always trying to get me to behave myself in here.
Yeah, you want me to compare you to Brad Pitt? Or
that'd be good.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right, we'll get that.
I want him to play me in the movie. Only he might be too old to play me from
George Clooney.
Yeah, all those guys are too old to play me in the '80s. You know, they could play me now, but not from
Val
the
Kilmer. We were talking about him at lunch.
I love him. Doc Holliday. Oh my God, best role ever. Yeah, Val's got some health problems.
Okay, why don't you pencil in there on the manuscript terms like suave and highly intelligent?
Suave, highly intelligent, coiffed hair,
dashing.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good one. Dashing.
All right, we'll get to that.
No, I'm really excited about your book coming out, and I can't wait. I'm going to buy a bunch of copies.
All right,
because we're going to give them away to our listeners on a contest.
Okay,
and I want to see this book on the New York bestseller list.
Well, here's hoping, but you never know what's going to happen with these books. The publishers never know. They just they throw them out there and they publicize them a little bit, and then we see what happens.
And man, I wish you the best on this TV series too.
Thank you.
That would be so good because you gave me that book shortly after we met, and I really enjoyed reading it.
We'll see on that one too. I'm hopeful, but it's not the first time I've had a book optioned, and they never made it to the screen, but I'm hopeful this time because it seems like there's some really good people involved.
If this makes it to the screen, will you come back and talk to us about it?
Absolutely.
Oh, God, that'd be great. Yeah.
Always looking for a chance to come to Waco.
Yeah, I love Waco. I do. Waco is my happy place. Or as Truman Simon says, you can screw with the whole world from Waco, Texas.
It's totally true.
And now on the internet, that really is true. Doug, is there anything I've forgotten to ask you about?
No, I don't think so. Great interview. Always a pleasure to be here, and great to see you. You got an interesting history. I think there's a book in you, isn't there?
I'm working on one. I've been working on it for 3 years, and it's so hard.
Yeah.
Because it pulls up all this stuff, stuff that I thought I'd forgotten. Because I've spent hours on my knees praying about this and forgiving people. So I won't hold a grudge because I read a good book called Radical Forgiveness, and it's about how forgiveness isn't really for the person you're forgiving, it's for you. It's to let go of all that baggage. And so I went through all that. But writing this book has been hard. Now, the podcast is a little easier because I've never had a problem running my mouth.
Right.
But putting it down on paper has been a little rough. But I'm probably halfway through.
Well, then don't get rid of all your anger because you need some of that anger to write.
Yeah. I'll have to pretend I'm angry then. Yeah, there's a book there. There's a movie there.
Okay, well, great. I look forward to it. The last thing I want to say is Cult of Glory.
Cult of Glory.
June 2020.
June 2020.
Viking by Doug Swanson.
Viking Publishers. I'm looking forward to it. Anytime you're going to be in Waco, please let me know.
I will.
Because as soon as you're out the door, Jonathan and I are going to think of 20 things we should have asked you about.
It's true.
And if I get hit by a truck, I'm calling you too.
Do that. Yeah, 187 with Vic. We are a boutique law firm. We are wonderful. We will handle your case seamlessly. We'll take care of you, and you need us because insurance companies are dishonest. I love you, Doug. Thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks, Vic. Great to see you.
Great to see you.
Great to be here.
Thank you for listening to the Vic Feazell Show podcast. We're a primary source podcast. We don't just read about it and then talk about it. We talk about people we've known, things we've done. We're a primary source podcast. Leave a review. Sign up for our email list. And go visit our store. We have a page on www.vicfeazell.com.
This is Texas singer-songwriter Brian Burns, and I'm here to tell you that my friend Vic Feazell has a new phone number. It's 1-877-948-4842. That spells with Vic, 877 with Vic. Now, we hope you're never in a car wreck, friend, but if you are, don't call for just any lawyer. Call for Vic Feazell at 877 with Vic.
With principal offices in Waco and Austin, Texas.